deeper about what network is actually doing in our body when we make those light touches. So we're going to talk a little bit about trauma. Now, trauma can be lots of different things. It can also be stress. Stress and trauma, to me, they're the same thing, okay? So you can exchange those words in here. So I made this for kids because I wanted parents to understand how easily kids can actually be traumatized or can get stressed, and how that relates to what happens to the rest of us. Because let's face it, we're all just big kids, right? We're all big kids, and then if you go over to the psychological part of it, we all have this inner child that is also trying to be healed and trying to figure out what the heck happened when we were a kid. So this all, you'll find later, actually relates to one another. So physical things that can happen. You can have physical stresses, for children, bedwetting, separation from parents. As adults, we can have fatigue, aches and pains. Some people, if they've been in a state of stress for a long period of time, they startle more easy. If the phone rings, they jump. If they've been in a car accident, if anybody's been in a car accident here, then you'll notice, especially if you're in one from behind, that you'll stop at a stoplight, and then you look behind you, and if that car seems like it's going too fast, even if it's going to stop in time, everything tenses. Because you've already been through it, and your body reacts the same way until you make a change. Headaches, stomach aches, difficulty concentrating, asthma, irritable bowel syndrome, all of these are different physical things that occur when our body's in a state of stress or a state of trauma. Other psychological and emotional factors, changes in play or inability to play. I think this is so funny because I wrote this for kids, but how many of us as adults, when we're in a state of stress, it's like, no, I gotta keep going. I don't have time to go take 10 minutes and ride the bike. I don't have time to go for a walk. I don't have time to, anything that's fun, any sort of play leaves our life, right? Because we're like, no, I don't have time. I've got to get this other thing done. So it's not just children, it's as adults too. We've taught ourselves that when we go into that state of stress, that state of survival, we can't go up into our prefrontal cortex and actually go, wow, look, there's a beautiful world out there. There's this beautiful snow, I could go play. Those parts of our neural pathways are not working when we're in that state of survival. Have you ever been, if you've had a trauma, a death, or any other thing, disconnected? You just feel like you're going through the motions in your life. This is often one of the first signs of depression, is that you're not really connected. You have blunted emotions. Other factors are anger, irritability, mood swings, anger and anxiety, withdrawing from others, more easily distracted. I mean, so many people today, we talk about they have ADHD. These people are under long-term chronic stress. And so that's part of what makes them, they're distractible, they can't focus, they don't know the body sense of what's going on in their body anymore because they can't pay attention to it because so much is built up inside. And we'll talk about that later. They won't care for themselves. If you've ever had a time in your life when something traumatic's happened and you just don't want to eat, you just don't want to shower. For me, I always want to wear the same clothes for 3 days. I'm just like, oh, do I have to change clothes today? So, I don't know why, but. So, the magical nervous system. So remember that I talked about the nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord, right? And they work together as the central nervous system. So in the brain, we have, in our prefrontal cortex, that upper part that I was talking about, we have God, we have our big concepts, we have compassion and creativity, we have decision-making and our signs of smell and taste. Then in our spinal cord, we have our nerves that go to our heart, our lungs, our digestion, our balance, our sleep, our walking, all of our glands, adrenal glands, thyroid glands, reproductive glands, our emotions, and our lungs. So as soon as a child is born, your brain and spinal cord, your central nervous system, control every action and reaction that you have. Now, how many of you knew, prior to chiropractic, how important your brain and spinal cord was? No, right? One person, that's good. Yeah, because most of us, we have no idea. We don't get taught in school, oh my gosh, I need to take care of this. I need to take care of my brain and spinal cord because they're controlling everything else. So it's really important for us to realize that, yeah, if you go back to that dime you have in your hand, that much weight on any one of these nerves cuts down the flow by 50%. Pretty striking, isn't it? So when trauma happens, we have a part of our brain called the hypothalamus. Okay, the hypothalamus is up here, and the hypothalamus, when any sort of trauma happens, it can be physical, mental, emotional, spiritual trauma, what happens is our brain takes a picture, click, and it then sends a cascade of information, chemical, physical information, through our nervous system to all the different systems. So it sends it to the endocrine system. The endocrine system controls every gland and every organ through chemical receptors that go back and forth. So the hypothalamus sends information to your thyroid, your pituitary glands, your adrenal glands, your reproductive glands. It then sends information to your limbic system, so it controls the emotions and that emotional motor system, again, that makes everything go tense. And it sends it to your autonomic system. Now this is really important because our autonomic system is supposed to be automatic. It's our breathing. It operates independently. It regulates our heart, our digestion, our breathing. It also takes care of our sympathetic, which is our fight or flight, our parasympathetic, which are resting and digesting, and our enteric system, which is all around the gut. So the reason this is so important is that all of this is supposed to operate independently, but when the hypothalamus takes a picture of a trauma, all of a sudden it gets a cascade of information saying, we're in trouble, danger, 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 a tiger's running after us, okay? So what happens when a tiger runs after us? Are we digesting food when a tiger runs after us? No, our digestion shuts down. So our body believes when this trauma happens, uh-oh, I'm in a state of trauma that's going to kill me, because that's all we know. We're either living or we're dead. Our body doesn't really understand all the in-between states. So that what happens is that our digestion shuts down. And our enteric autonomic system, which is all around our gut, also slows everything down. Now, how many of you, when you've been in a state of stress, have had digestive problems? And have you wondered, now why is my stomach all messed up all of a sudden? It's because your autonomic system is getting the message from the hypothalamus saying that there's something wrong and you shouldn't digest right now because we need to use the energy somewhere else. Make sense? Your heart, it regulates your heart and it regulates your breathing. How many people, when you're in a state of stress, stops breathing? Yep, right. What happens when we stop breathing? All of a sudden we don't get oxygen to our brain. And what happens is we begin to breathe shallow, and we think that shallow breathing is normal. So we become hypoxic, meaning that we don't get enough oxygen all the time. One of the greatest ways that cancer can grow is through a hypoxic system. So if you breathe shallow over time and over time and over time, and you don't get those deep breaths, things grow that aren't supposed to be there. It's part of what occurs. So what we want is to be able to tell the autonomic system, stop, stop. That was just this one instant in time. It isn't our continuing experience in life. So here's the interesting thing about it, is that unexpected shock influences all of the systems of the body and mind. So if we find out that something happened to somebody, if we're in a car accident, if we fall down and break a leg, any of those things are unexpected shock. Now our body, after 20 minutes, is supposed to go, oh, okay, everything's okay. But what we find in our lives now is that it becomes this chronic feedback cycle. So when we have a trauma reaction, the fight or flight, or stress, stays on. What this does is this increases your cortisol. Cortisol is run by the adrenal glands, because the adrenal glands are your fight or flight glands. They're the ones who say, okay, go, 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 you can do it, or stop. So the cortisol is high, and it remains high. Over time, high cortisol starts to destroy memory in the brain centers. Okay? As we get older, we think, oh, I'm just getting older, so I can't remember. A lot of times it's because we've been running a high level of cortisol for a long time. Your thyroid, ovaries, testes shut down. How does this affect people? For women, really bad PMS. And oftentimes we find that women can't get pregnant. The other thing that happens in the 40s for women, if you've been running high chronic stress for a long period of time, is you start to get sluggish and you go to your medical doctor and they test your thyroid and they say, oh, you have hypothyroidism. We need to put you on Synthroid or some other thing to pick up your thyroids. What's actually happening is your adrenal glands are pumping out way too much cortisol, and so your adrenal glands have become exhausted. And when your adrenal glands become exhausted, they start to pull hormones from your thyroid. So your thyroid is actually secondary to what's happening in your ovaries. The reason this is so important for women as we get older is because our ovaries are what send out all the sex hormones, but over time, as we start to go through menopause, our ovaries should downregulate and our adrenal glands should upregulate to handle the hormones. But because we're in long-term chronic stress, a lot of women's adrenal glands, by the time they hit their 50s and they hit menopause, are exhausted. And so then they go through 9, 10, 11 years of really tough menopause, when really we could have just rebuilt their adrenal glands, got them out of a state of stress, and they wouldn't have to have gone through all that. The other thing about a trauma reaction is it stops people from making decisions. Or it's like it puts these glasses on them and they make their decisions from a base of fear. So instead of saying, wow, what are the infinite possibilities, they say, oh, I don't want to create that again, so what do I do to not create that again? And I want you to pay attention to my posture. Oh, what are the possibilities, right? So your shoulders are back, my head's back, my chest is out. This, when our body is in this state, we have over 200 receptors sending good endorphins to our body, to all of our little cells in our body. When we're in a state like this, we have less than 50 receptors available for all those good endorphins. So who's going to be depressed? This one or this one? This one, right? Because we have we don't have any ability to actually get all the hormones that are coming through. It stops people from taking risks. And there is good risk in life. We want to be able to take risk in life to be able to move forward, because our higher brain centers, our prefrontal cortex, actually likes novelty. It likes to do new things. And it becomes bored and it becomes frustrated if it doesn't have novelty. Well, if you're in a state of trauma and your survival part of your brain is running you, then you're not going to take any of those risks. And that's going to send you into a downward spiral with your mind and your emotions. It also really creates learned helplessness to a point where we feel like we can't get out of it, where we feel like this is just the way our life is going to be for the rest of our life, and we don't know what to do about it. And nobody can really help us because it just is. And again, that's your survival part of your brain hijacking usually your emotional and your intellectual brain. So it really disrupts our worldview. And one thing that it's just really important, most people go, oh yeah, that happened in my childhood, no big, it was then, this is now, it didn't really matter. And you'll remember when you came in for your first visit with us, we went back to even your birth. Like, what happened at your birth? What faults did you have growing up? Because all of those things affect your body-mind. So childhood trauma increases the risk of future trauma. What happens is that we get neural networks set in our body-mind, and so our body recreates it over and over because the hypothalamus has taken this picture, and everything we see and everything we do is filtered through what the hypothalamus said 20, 30 years ago. So there's lots of different trauma therapy approaches. Of course, we're network chiropractors, so network spinal analysis and somatorespiratory integration, the two modalities that we do here, are primary in actually helping to rewrite the way that the neurophysiology works to actually create a greater pathway that you will take more often to those higher parts of your brain and to actually clear out the trauma and clear out those neural patterns. Somatic experiencing is another thing that helps. EMDR, eye movement, desensitization and reprocessing, acupuncture can, and play therapy. So there's lots of different modalities, and I just wanted to let you know this so most people, when they're really on their healing path, they start to try different things. And so these are all things that work really well. Of course, I'm partial to network spinal analysis because it's the only thing that actually clears out the trauma in the nervous system through creating this wave through the body itself.